Looks like we are streaming live now. So this is the meeting of the Early Childhood Subcommittee. We're taking up two bills today, the first of which is House Bill 155. It has a most notable sponsor. I'm pleased about that. This is a bill that we introduced last year. So we're fast tracking it because we feel like we approved it. We could just vote on it, but there has been a suggestion of an amendment to this bill that the bill actually, and I can recount the bill to you if you want me to as well, but basically it's a non-discrimination bill for entities that are receiving state funds, specifically targeted at pre-K and early childhood. If they're receiving any state funds, that they can't discriminate based on all of the important factors that we can list. It has been pointed out that the bill focuses on the student only in a couple of passages. And to that end, there has been a suggestion that we amend it to include a little more. Now I'll hand that off to you.
To me? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Yes, I'm sending an amendment around right now to your to all of your public emails. And all this amendment does basically in two passages in the bill, it talks about discriminating against a student or prospective student and based on an individual's sex, race, ethnicity, gender, marital status, or sexual identification or disability status, and I'm sorry, gender identification or disability status. And this amendment tweaks that slightly to say that it prohibits discrimination that would expel a current student or fail to accept a prospective student or provide any negative benefit against any individual based on any individual's membership in any of those groups, if that makes sense. So it's just expanding it slightly from prospective and current students to cover any withholding of benefits against any individuals.
And so broadly, what we were thinking is that we wouldn't want a student to get discriminated against because his parents or the people who brought that student in were gay. There's two men or two women or anything else that would be considered. And we heard an example yesterday where the mother-daughter T, or maybe the day before in committee, where the mother-daughter T, only one mother. And so that would be an example. That's not one of the most severe. More severe would be not allowing the student into the school, but we decided to stretch it. This amendment would make it stretch to people who are part of the student's representation, I think. Is that pretty accurate, Alistair?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And since the sponsor is here, I would give you the floor, Delegate Wilkins, if you would like to, or if you feel like we've covered it, that's okay with me too.
Yes, thank you. I'm just taking a look at the amendment and kind of writing it in here in my draft. But yes, I think we want to make sure that we are covering the forms of discrimination and the people that we're looking to cover. I think that this is an amendment ensures that. So we really appreciate your work on it, both to and Delegate Chair Ebersole.
Thank you. And to the advocates that are in the room, if you would like to speak, we may recognize you. The thing to do is raise your hand so I can see your hand up in the chat. And then if I recognize you, you can start your video and talk. But I haven't seen anybody doing that. Of course, I only talked about for a second, and we do have someone. That's my warning that I better get online, and I'm already on. I can't believe I said it that late. So just for some input, and I know Ann Seacott is here. Ann Seacott, tell everybody who you represent and let us know what you're going to do. And if you would unmute her, please, Sean.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks. Ann Seacott here representing the ACLU of Maryland. And we just want to say we think that the amendment clarifies what the intent of the bill always was. So we don't believe this is an actual expansion. We think this is very clarifying. So we appreciate it.
Okay, thank you very much. Anybody else in the committee have any comment on this amendment? And if there is none, I would look for a motion on it. But Haven Shoemaker, I see your hand up.
didn't we establish at the bill hearing yesterday that the discrimination that's being targeted by this particular bill is otherwise covered in other areas of the law? I think it was described as like a patchwork. Didn't we?
Yeah, so,
Didn't we
Thank
hear
you.
that?
sorry, go ahead,
That's
Delegate.
okay. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
Delegate Wilkins, do you want to respond to that or do you want to let Alistair do it?
Sure. Thank you, Delegate Shoemaker. No, that has not been established. There is really nowhere in our laws that actually prohibit, when it comes to non-public schools who might be receiving state funds, that prohibits them from discrimination. And so that's one of the things that this bill addresses, is putting all of our state funds on a very clear framework of what discrimination is and prohibiting it. So thank you for the opportunity to address that. Alistair, I don't know if you wanted to add anything.
Yeah, I was just going to say that sometimes in certain budgetary language, we do include similar provisions, but that's not a permanent part of the statute, and it only applies to the particular programs in question. So like, for instance, a lot of this language is very similar to the language that's in the Boost program, but that has to be adopted every year by the General Assembly. So this is putting in statute so that it applies to all funds going to all non-public schools receiving funds from the state, and it's more of a permanent fixture this way.
I got you.
Okay, thank you. So right now you have the amendment in front of you. I'd like to know if is there any more discussion on that amendment, or if anybody would like to move the amendment.
I move the amendment.
I was going to say, without a motion, we're not going to do it. And I see a second for Delegate Guyton, so it's been moved and properly seconded. Is there any more discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, I would like to call a vote on the amendment. Excuse me? Delegate Shoemaker?
No, that wasn't me.
Okay,
That was
you
just
lit
my
up yellow
phone
there.
buzzing.
You
Sorry.
lit up, the yellow box went around you, so I assumed it was you. Okay, all in favor of the amendment to the bill, signify by raising your hand or saying aye. All right, I've got all but two actually voting yes at this point, but that's still 4 votes, which is enough for it to carry in this case. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, actually. All right. Delegate Santi, did you want to vote on that? You were obviously getting a cup of coffee or something. She's yelling, but she's muted. You're muted.
I'm reading the,
Okay, got it.
I'm carefully reading the amendment.
Yes, well, that's good too. Rather than thinking
I have a lot of screens going on here, like
you
everybody
weren't there
else.
reading, you weren't just reading the funny papers in between all this talk. That's what
Can't-
we call it, is the funny papers. And I'm not one of them. I just like to use the phrase. Haven's nodding his head though. He gets it.
I
You
do.
there, Delegate Butler. Have you heard of the funny papers before? Okay, so the amendment is carried. Now, on the bill, is there any discussion on the bill at this point? We've had a little bit sort of on it and on the amendment at the same time, but I'll allow for more if anybody has any. Okay, seeing none, is there a motion?
I have some questions.
I see Delegate Guyton. I heard, and before we get going, I want to do this fairly. Delegate Santi, was that you saying you have some questions?
I do.
Okay.
And I apologize, but I mean, we just had the hearing yesterday and I've been trying to get this, particularly, I was trying to read carefully the letter of opposition coming from the Catholic conferences, that as they represent a large amount of Catholic schools in the state. And while I really do understand this bill, I'm trying to get my head around this is a very large group of people that represent a major part of schools in the state. So I really want to carefully consider their comments here. So I'm not sure that I'm ready to vote on this at the moment.
Okay. This is a bill that we, except for this small change, or except for the change that we voted on positively last year. So the objections they had would be the same objections they had last year when we passed it. So I'm not sure if something new has cropped up that has made it that we shouldn't vote on at this time.
That's what I'm trying to review here. Again, like I said, it is a very quick turnaround on this. So I'm trying to look to see.
Mm-hmm.
Does anybody else, maybe staff has some insight?
Well, let's do this. Let's hold this bill to the end of the meeting. We'll come back to it and we'll see if we feel comfortable having to vote on it. I see that one of the advocates wants to talk about it, and so we'll use that as a moment for thinking. Mr. Lemaster, you're unmuted. There you go.
Thank you. There's so many buttons, it's hard to get used to. Thank you everyone for allowing me to hop in today and to be available in case questions come up related to this piece of legislation. At Free State Justice, I am the executive director. My pronouns are he, him, and they, them. And I'm very excited to see this kind of come up again before the committee. I think in speaking to the Catholic Charities opposition, I would like to kind of speak from my own personal experience. I am someone who did 12 years of Catholic schooling, not in the state of Maryland, but in the state of Pennsylvania. And for me as a queer student, sort of growing up in that space, I think one of the challenges is that you consistently see homophobia and sort of anti-gay bias in a number of different school settings, regardless of their religious affiliation. One of the struggles that I know that I had was not really feeling like you had any advocate, support, or outlet, right, to be able to address issues as they would arise. And so I would, for me, one of the strongest pieces of this piece of legislation is really clearly outlining mechanisms for students and their families that when they are experiencing these issues in their schoolings, that there is a way that they can be addressed. And so even though I definitely respect, some of the opposition that Catholic Charities and other parochial schools might have to this, I would like to push back on really the important piece of just giving space for folks, to be heard and to stand up and say that, this type of discrimination is not okay, regardless of where you're receiving education in the state, and for any institution really that is receiving public funds. And so that's just kind of the piece I wanted to kind of contribute there.
Thanks. And it's critical to point out that this does not prevent those schools from discriminating in this way. It only prevents them from doing so if they are interested in receiving state funds, just as our public schools are funded by the state. If they're being either completely or partially funded by the state, then they have to adhere to the kinds of rules the state holds for anti-discrimination. They're welcome even now to withdraw and from receiving that funds and actually be selective in how they treat people and how they admit them. And I see Tina Dove, and I think, do you have something new to offer? Okay, then I would like to recognize you then.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just very quickly in answer and follow up also to Delegate Lasante's question.
And just to point out, Tina Dove has her moniker at the bottom there. She's representing the Maryland State Education Association.
Yes, and forgive me for having an ear in JPR as we are testifying on this bill today as well. The requirements that are laid out in this bill, as I noted in my testimony, they are not new requirements. The Catholic Conference and others that participate in any of the textbook and technology program, et cetera, are all familiar with these requirements as they are current requirements that they have to agree to in order to participate in the textbook and technology program and the boost voucher program, et cetera. They have to sign assurances. They have a document they all have to sign that says that they are not going to discriminate. What is different is that this legislation includes sexual orientation, gender identity. That language is now included in the budget language from last year. So again, that would have been an assurance that just as recent as last year, they would have had to sign off on and be in compliance with in order to participate with the program. So there's no new requirement being asked of the folks that are already participating in the programs where they're receiving either in kind or direct payment through the state. So this is just codifying it, as Alistair pointed out. This is codifying it into state law versus having it into budget language, and it's also making it applicable to public schools as well.
Thank you.
So does it go
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
beyond just the textbook program, or is it just,
There are several ways they receive money from the state: textbooks, transportation, technology. Boost is an example of them receiving
Right.
money from the state.
Right.
That's sort of four that come to mind right off the top of my head. But the new pre-Ks are going to be state funded since we have a mixed delivery system that's going to come up as part of the blueprint. The local school systems don't have the physical space to actually offer pre-K across the board. They'll be offering some, but we're going to look to some of the nonprofits and the businesses to help us with that. To that, they're going to receive funding. And so we want them to also not be permitted, if they participate in that program, to discriminate against students or their parents and guardians, for example.
And sorry, there was similar language in the blueprint, which made those institutions part of state funding. There was similar language about the same anti-discrimination language last year.
It looks like Doug Asante, you might have enough information now. I think I'm going to go ahead and ask, we have a motion and a second on this bill. I think I'm going to go ahead and ask for a vote on it. So if you're in favor of this, we need to do this carefully here. I don't see Delegate Shoemaker here. I'm a little worried that he left or got kicked off. Does anyone know? Is he trying to get back in, Sean? I don't want to disclude his vote here at this point. Okay, well, we'll check with him, but all in favor of a favorable on this bill, raise your hand, please. I see 4, 5 hands up, all opposed. I see Delegate Boatler. So we are at 5 to 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Is that right, Alistair? I'm having trouble counting people. They're moving around.
That's correct.
4 to 1, 5 to 1, 5 to 1.
You're 5 to 1 right now.
So it moves favorable with the amendment, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you all very much on that bill. That concludes our work on 155. Now we're going to move to House Bill 396, which also we have the sponsor present for this one. This is the bill. I want to get a little bit of information up on my screen here.
I believe, Delegate, that this is actually HB 392. Last year.
Did I say 6? Yes, that's because I read it off of one of the sheets that she sent me, and
Sorry.
I should have been more careful.
It's very close. It's hard. I switched it a couple times.
Okay, so it's 392. And this bill requires the State Department of Education by 2022, January 2022, to establish guidelines for early childhood development screenings for children younger than age 3. Beginning in July of that year, then each child care center that right now that is required to be licensed to hold a letter of compliance, which we'll talk about what that might mean, must honor the parent or guardian of each child under age 3 who enters care at the center, and an evaluation of the child using developmental guidelines. So the idea here is that we're going to have child care centers say, hey, we can offer an evaluation of this. This is kind of an extension of Ready to Read. We're trying to make sure kids are developmentally ready, and the parents need to know if they're not. It doesn't require them to offer the evaluation or the screening, but it does actually make the child care center, make them aware of it and offer it. If they physically can't offer it themselves, it makes them tell those people where they can find it in the community, because there's lots of birth to 5 organizations out there that can do that, and they would have to know that. Let's talk about the bill for a second, then we got a couple of amendments. Does anyone have any questions about the bill? Yes, Delegate Boatler. Don't forget to unmute yourself there.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I understood what you had just said. So like, for instance, an early childhood center, they can offer this screening by one of their employees. Is that right?
Has to be someone who's trained a little bit. Isn't that right, Delegate Guyton? I think that's in the
right.
bill.
That's correct. And that's through MSDE, Office of Child Care.
So
Okay,
MSD
so
would
that
offer the
employee
training,
would
and
be
they would offer the
trained.
program. They could get somebody up to speed at their center who could do that, and they would. If they didn't have somebody, and we're not requiring to have somebody be trained, they would be required to know where someone could get a screening. And by the way, there is a screening, and we're going to talk about how they let them know in a minute.
Well, yeah, I think that's important because my wife actually runs a preschool. And I know that from time to time, she, along with the teacher, they do that now. If
Right.
they see a student that, they feel should be evaluated, because my wife has a lot of background, got her degrees in early childhood development. But I tell you, some of the problems I noticed that she had is that a lot of times when you approach these parents, they get very angry with you. And she's had to actually leave the school because of that. And so, you know, that's why my concern was, I think it's a good idea.
Good.
But my concern about is having an employee that would necessarily do that, you know, in an early childhood center.
So I would offer two things on that. One, actually, we're going to get to this too. In a legal sense, we may, on the recommendation of one of the people who testify, say alter this slightly, but that there is some some exemption from civil liability, because as teachers, I remember that we weren't allowed to recommend things to parents if we weren't considered expert in it. You know, kid's really active, maybe he needs someone to settle him down. We never said that, because that would be outside of our purview. But the other thing is if we pass this bill, then if that person leaves your school, they're going to find the exact same thing happening at the other school they go to, because that's what the law would say. So you can say, well, you can go if you want, but this is a law and other schools are going to recommend this to you as well. So it would actually level the playing field a bit, I believe.
And Mr. Chair, can I add one more point to that?
Please, yes, thank you for asking.
Yeah, first, thank you, Delegate Boltler, because that's a great point. And that's one reason that I wrote the bill in this way, so that the child care center has to offer it to every child. So no child is being singled out and no family is being singled out. And I think that really addresses some of those concerns.
Well, I don't necessarily think that's a good idea, that if you're offering it to every child, because in the end of the day, you know, you are going to say, hey, you know, your son, your daughter, they need further testing or they need certain services. So I think offering it to everybody is not really necessary.
So let's be clear, offering and administering are two different things. They just have to be clear they offer it. They don't have to administer it to everybody. In fact, the parent has to agree to it before they administer it. And in the case if they don't have it, the parent would have to, they can also, the other option here is they can bring, if they feel like they want to offer it to parents on site, they can bring the agency in to do it if they want to. So parents could say, no, my kid's fine, which parents say. That's unfortunate because sometimes they're sticking their head in the sand.
Yeah, because I can tell you, in some of the cases where my wife has told the parents to go and they went to the school system, they were just ignored. So, but anyhow, as long as the center, they're not obligated to do this. Is that right?
Correct. They're obligated to offer it. Okay.
Right.
Not obligated to do the screening. Now, if the parent asks for it and says, yeah, I want that.
Right.
They would be obligated to do it. Okay.
Yeah.
Do I have that right, Delegate Guyton?
Well, as amended,
Not entirely.
Subcommittee last year, they're not, if the parent requests it, they're obligated either to administer it if they can. So it sounds like Delegate Boltler's wife's center could do that because they already have that training. But if they don't have to administer. They just have to facilitate.
Right.
Sure
That's the term we use, is facilitate. Right. Good.
Okay. That sounds good.
Jennifer Nice, I'm going to ask you to turn off your camera if you don't mind. Thanks. That's all right. Okay. So there are a handful of adjustments that we discussed with the sponsor as possible adjustments. I got 4 of them here. We may get through them. I have until about 1:15. All of us want to get off for a little bit before we come back to the briefing. We'll see if we get through it. The first one I would say is that a language adjustment we think probably could be made. What the bill says to evaluate, that they're required to evaluate. Evaluate means to me that at the end you have to tell what the results are. You have to kind of synthesize them and say what they said, whereas they might not have that expertise. So the thought was we would change the word evaluate kind of throughout the bill to the word screen. Is that correct, Alistair? Do I have that amendment, or do you want to expand on that for me a little bit?
I think that captures it.
Okay. And Delegate Guyton, do you want to talk about that amendment at all?
No, that's a friendly amendment. I think it does take, it's much easier for the child care centers to provide that service. And that was the intent of the bill. So
Okay.
Thank you.
And so I think we're going to take all 4 amendments separately because they're sort of not on the same subject. And I don't want everybody to have to vote on because the others deal with other topics and we might have some more discussion on them. So for a start, I'd like to know if I have a motion on this amendment.
Mhm.
It's an amendment in spirit and we'll get it put together.
Okay. So I move
need
the
a-
amendment if I can.
Thank you. I got a second from Delegate Branch. Is there any more discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all in favor of the amendment, raise your hands, please. Okay, any opposed? None, that carries unanimously. So the next amendment that we want to look at is language at the end that says that the daycare provider must communicate, and I think I don't have the language right here, I could get it, but I think we felt like the language was a little loose in terms of, like, it looked like the way the language was written to alert them to these evaluations or these screenings, the way it was written, we felt like they could put a flyer on a bulletin board and that would be considered. So we wanted to change just providing or making it clear that through direct communication with the parent. That means
Right.
emailing them directly or speaking them directly or giving them a personal letter that they take with them about it rather than just having it displayed somewhere. And so we thought Alistair felt that the term direct communication would take care of us there.
Thank you.
Anything you want to add to that amendment that I haven't covered in what we wanted to do to it?
No, I think you all nailed it.
Okay. Is there any discussion on that amendment or any concern about that amendment? All right, then. Do I have a motion for the amendment? If I don't, we won't do it.
I'll move that amendment.
I got a motion. Do I have a second? Delegate Lasanti seconds. I'm having trouble pulling out motions here. I don't know why. Okay. So if there's no more discussion on the amendment, I'd like to take a vote. All in favor of amending the bill to make it that the daycare providers have to have direct communication about this rather than just general communication, raise your hand, please. Any opposed? Okay, and that also carries unanimously, so we'll add that amendment as well. All right, now we get into a little more sticky one. It looks like the language at the beginning of the bill, the way it's written, and it has to do with this language in the bill, where it says that an early childhood development screening from a center that is required to be licensed or to hold a letter of compliance. So the question became legally, did that mean only community child care centers, or did that mean all child care centers? And council felt that that meant only community child care centers. In talking with the sponsor, it was the feeling that we wanted both family and community child care centers to take care of that, to do that. We wanted to change the language in such a way that this requirement would be on both community and family child care centers. And that, unless Alistair, there's something else I should say about that. Do you have anything to add to what I said there? Okay. Any discussion on that amendment? Anybody need a clarification on it? It's
Yeah,
pretty big because we're going to add in family child cares here, it looks like.
Yeah, I have a question. So you're talking about, these are folks who do daycare from their homes?
Correct.
You're trying to include in that?
Yes. Family child care centers are defined by law to be those that, I think 8 students or fewer. I believe that's the number, Alistair. Does that sound right to you?
Yeah, something
Beyond
like
that, the other classification of child care centers are community child care centers, which are ones that have large number of students and I think are,
Right.
I think the law
Okay.
says you can only have 8 students in your home, 8 children. So that the law
No,
says.
actually, you can have more than that, but that's okay.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
There's
My
family.
wife used to do it. This is how
Yeah.
we got our kids. And she could have up to 12.
Okay,
That's
thank you.
right.
I had the number
So-
wrong.
No,
Alistair, you want
there-
to clarify that for us? Family
Yes,
child
I-
care, but 8 and 12?
Yes, happily. So the family child care center can only be 8, but a large family child care home can be up to 12.
Okay, but
there's
and what would
two
that be
separate
classified as, community, or is that, would they have already fallen into the classification by the business
No,
about
it's a
being?
slightly, because it's a residence in which a family child care is provided, it's a large family child care center, not
Okay.
not a
Okay,
child
but it's still family child care center. So but the thrust of this amendment is to have them be included, the requirement that they screen people, they screen students, or not requirement they screen, a requirement that they make the parents aware of the screening and offer it to them either in person or explain to them how to get it. And so it would include another class of child care centers. Is there any discussion on this amendment?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Yes. Thank you. Delegate Wilkins.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think some colleagues might know I'm very particularly sympathetic to the family childcare providers. My mother is one. And I just noticed that they sent a letter of opposition. While noting that they were excluded, they also, they still opposed the bill. So I was just wondering if any of our amendments address any of the concerns that they have.
So I called Ruby Daniels
Okay.
yesterday because
Okay.
I felt like this might be sneaking up on them a bit. I thought perhaps she was going to come to this committee meeting to talk on that. I'm sorry that I don't see her here right now. Are any of the other advocates representing the Maryland Family Child Care Association? Okay, so I didn't get anything I just said, I want to warn you that we're going to hear this bill today, that'll come up in committee. And so, but I haven't heard, I'm sorry.
Mhm.
Mr. Chair, may I address Delegate Wilkins' question?
Please, Delegate Guyton,
Okay.
thank you for asking.
Thank you. Delegate Wilkins, I have spoken to, actually, this amendment came from the Child Care Association groups that came to me over the interim because they felt like all of the child care centers and family child care should be included. The reason that I chose not to include them in last year's bill, which is what we're working off now, that passed, is because the restrictions were more strict. Like, we were requiring more of them, and we didn't feel like it was fair to ask the family child care centers to participate in that, if what at that time we were requiring was that they be trained and that they offer the screenings. But once we changed the bill to all they basically had to do was let the parents know where to go for a screening, which they should all be doing that anyway. Then we felt like it was fair to add them back into the bill because we're not adding any cost or really any extra effort for those who are already, doing this work and sort of know what they're supposed to be doing. So it's really just to catch some bad actors who are ignoring this.
Got it. That's really helpful. Thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah, I thank you for that historical perspective, Delegate Guyton. I do remember last year the bill was,
Right.
had steeper requirements, and we did reduce them significantly. But we didn't think at the time, it didn't occur to us that then maybe we should be able to include less child care centers that had fewer resources. All right, is there any more discussion on this amendment? Does anyone want to move this amendment?
I'll move the amendment again.
Okay, we have a motion on the amendment. Do I have a second? I have a second. Delegate Branch seconds the amendment. Any more discussion? All right, then. Let's all in favor of adding this amendment to House Bill 392, raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, I've got everyone raising their hands one way or another. So that's done. None opposed then, because everybody raised their hand. All right, last one is number 4. 4 amendments, so we're down to the last one here, is on the issue the gentleman brought up yesterday of liability. He was concerned that the last clause in the bill prevents anyone from any sort of civil liability. And he said, basically what I understood him to say is that he felt that was too broad in this case, that maybe that exemption from civil liability would extend beyond what we're talking about here. And so this is what Delegate Boatler was talking about at the beginning. And we felt that, yes, they should be protected from civil liability, but only on the top of the bill itself. Alistair, do you want to explain how you would change it?
Yes, so this is again an amendment in concept and not drafted yet, but I think changing it to say something like is immune from civil liability arising out of the screening done under this section. Something to that effect.
Done or recommended, I would say. Okay.
Okay.
Because somebody might say, like Delegate Boatler said, you can't do that. I'm going to sue you for recommending that.
Right.
So they would.
That's a good point.
But we would limit the exemption from civil liability to be those arising out of the requirements of this bill.
Yes. That's
Delegate Guyton, did I see your hand?
No, I'm fine.
Okay.
You did. I was waving my dog.
It's another way to get it. Well, the dog's not the chair of the committee, but you can try. It's worth an effort in that case. Anybody have any other questions about this or any comment about this amendment? Okay, seeing none, I would like to know if I have a motion on this amendment. All right, I'm not getting a motion on.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Delegate Lasanti. Does anyone want to second this amendment?
I'll second.
Okay, it's properly seconded. Phew. Okay. By the way, if that happens, that happens. If there's nobody interested in moving an amendment, then I'm perfectly willing to say we didn't take it up. I mean, this was not an amendment recommended by anybody in this committee. This was recommended by someone testifying yesterday, which is great because testimony then does its job. And Alistair and I even mentioned this to Delegate Guyton, we talked about it a little bit and we felt like it would be something that was worth offering in this case. And Delegate, I hope that actually makes you feel a little better that we're protecting them in that case for that. And we're being specific about them not being in any trouble for offering this in this particular case. All right. I forgot to take a vote. Sorry. So if there's no more discussion on the amendment, I'd like to see everyone raise their hand who is in favor of this amendment. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hands. So that there's nobody on the screen to vote no. So that amendment also carries unanimously. Now I need an opinion and I'll take it. We put a lot of amendments on this bill. Anyone, I would move it now. I would ask you to move it now if we're ready to go, but if we're not, I'm perfectly willing to hold it till our next meeting. So does anyone object to us voting on it right now? That's what I'm asking. No, it doesn't look that way. So is there any more discussion on the bill then? All right, so do I have a motion for favorable or unfavorable on this bill?
Move favorable.
Thank you,
Second.
Madam. And I could call you Madam Chair. I can call you Madam Parliamentarian too. So many titles.
Chair.
And I see a second from Delegate Guyton as well. All right, so all in favor of moving favorable on this bill, raise your hands, please. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hands. It's unanimous then. And so the bill is moved favorably. You can expect to see it come up in the next voting session in ways, not the next one, maybe, I don't know when it is. In Ways and Means it should appear. So I think that's our business for today. I appreciate that we got through it, but we had some stuff to really consider on these two as far as amendments went. And I'm grateful to you for your time and I'll see you in about 20 minutes. Bye.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Aye.